Welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Last night, lines were drawn at the Democratic debate, some candidates distancing themselves from the progressives and their socialist policy plans. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the divide.
10 Democratic candidates debated their plans for the country in Detroit. Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were center stage. But as they advertised their socialist policies such as Medicare for All, Warren's wealth tax, and decriminalizing illegal entry into the United States, the more moderate Democrats drew the line, distancing themselves from the progressives.
I think Democrats win when we run on real solutions, not impossible promises. When we run on things that are workable, not fairy tale economics.
While Delaney doesn't agree with Sanders' Medicare for All plan, he is proposing his own universal health care plan. Tim Ryan and John Hickenlooper also agreed that the way to win the election is not with radical policies.
You're going to take private insurance away from 180 million Americans. You might as well FedEx the election to Donald Trump.
Rich Valdez, associate producer of The Mark Levin Show and host of This Is America, says some Democrats are not only distancing themselves from their fellow Democrat Party members, some are also siding with the president.
There's still a lot of baby boomers out there that I think identify as the JFK Democrat. They feel disenfranchised by the Democratic Party, that with these debates and with their rhetoric and with the squad and with so much of what's going on, feel that they've been abandoned.
The Democrat debate will continue tonight. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Last night on the debate stage, Democratic candidates sparred over how much the government should be involved in Americans' health care. The issue brought out possibly the most stark contrast between progressives and moderates in the party. NTD's Holly Kellum has that, plus what the head of the Medicare department has to say about Medicare for All.
2020 hopefuls on the debate stage were largely supportive of expanding Medicare, the government-run healthcare program for seniors.
Medicare for All is comprehensive. It covers all healthcare needs for senior citizens. It will finally include dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses.
Under Senator Bernie Sanders' plan, 180 million Americans with private health insurance would be moved to Medicare.
Trade talks between the United States and China ended without any significant progress after negotiators met in Shanghai, working to end the long-running trade war. NTD reporter Jeremy Sandberg has more on the factors holding up a resolution.
Trade representatives talked over dinner yesterday and for half a day today, before scheduling talks in September back in the United States. Unresolved problems brought out by the broken-down draft agreement from May include trade practices and enforcement mechanisms to ensure China makes administrative and regulatory changes.
No, they have no credibility at all. Look at what happened in Hong Kong right now. They had this deal, they had this agreement with the British. They said they were going to keep the system unchanged for 50 years. Now seeing what they're doing, they're trying to impose the communist, dictatorship.
China failed to follow through on its previous promise to buy agricultural products from the United States and has a history of not fulfilling its pledges for structural change. China
agreed to so many terms and conditions when China was accessed into WTO back in 2001. They kept none of those promises.
The trade war has caused volatility in stock markets worldwide and hit China's economy hard due to tariffs, with factory activity down in July for the third month straight, according to an official report from Chinese authorities.
So they don't have time to keep delaying, to play the delay tactics, because they're hurting.
Trump warned China not to wait, saying if he is reelected, negotiations would be even tougher and could result in no deal at all. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Two federal agencies announced a plan today on lowering drug prices through imports. The FDA and Health and Human Services listed two ways Americans can do this. One allows importing certain FDA-approved drugs from Canada. The other allows drug makers that sell both in the U.S. and other countries to import their drugs at a lower price. Both plans are still in the proposal stage. If finalized, Health Secretary Alex Azar says this will be the first time the agency has approved imported pharmaceuticals. And after winning a court battle on funding for the border wall last week, Trump is celebrating yet another court victory today. As NTD's Holly Kellum reports, this battle was about collusion with Russia.
President Trump took a victory lap today after winning a court battle against the Democratic National Committee yesterday. The DNC alleged the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to hack the DNC before the 2016 election. A Manhattan federal judge threw the case out, saying Russia couldn't be sued in a U.S. civil court. He also said there wasn't evidence to connect the Russian hackers with the Trump campaign or WikiLeaks, the site that published over 44,000 DNC emails. Trump responded last night saying this is really big stuff, especially coming from a highly respected judge who was appointed by President Clinton.
2 years ago,
this after Robert Mueller investigated possible conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia for almost 2 years. Mueller concluded there was no conspiracy. Trump this morning called the Russian investigation treason, expressing hope that Attorney General William Barr and other attorneys general will find out in great detail what happened. Holly Kellum, NTD News.
President Donald Trump met with Mongolia's President Kholtmagane Batulga at the White House today, both sides trying to expand their security and economic relationship. Talks were expected to focus on trade, defense, security, and investment. During the trip, President Batulga gifted Trump's youngest son, Barron, a horse. Trump spoke with the reporters about the gesture.
You found a name for the horse yet?
I did. Victory. Victory. Thank you very much for the horse. Did you see a picture of the horse?
Not yet.
Beautiful. Mongolia, the great fighters. You know, they're great fighters, great wrestlers, great champions, right? And we have the grand champion of sumo wrestling with us from a couple of years ago, and he's here from Mongolia. I was told that in Japan, actually, that they've had 4 grand champions from Mongolia, so they're great fighters. Your people are great fighters. Thank you very much. We need great fighters, too.
After a brief talk, both leaders joined the expanded bilateral meeting. Mongolia is working with the U.S. to sustain a free and open Indo-Pacific region and to increase bilateral trade. Yesterday at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, President Batulga said,
One example where we could achieve so much in the processing industry is the Third Neighbor Trade Act, whereby it would allow our companies to develop the cashmere and other textile processing industries.
Mongolia's trade with the U.S. is only 1.7% of its total trade, while China is Mongolia's largest partner at 64%. Reporting by Kitty Wang, NTD News. Virginia Congressman Denver Riggleman is putting Congress's recess this August to good use by visiting the USMexico border this week. He intends to learn about the current situation and using that knowledge to help Congress address the ongoing border security crisis.
During his New Mexico visit, he is photographing and writing about his experiences, including sharing photos of the conditions inside ICE holding areas. In one tweet, he explained that the facilities he saw that day were nothing like they have been portrayed in the media. Riggleman also met with Border Patrol officials at the El Paso section of the border. One evening, he was present as CBP agents apprehended 4 individuals, including a family unit who said they were from Brazil and Cuba.
I just watched as Border Patrol apprehended 4 individuals. One was a family unit, another was an individual. It's like from Brazil, and I think it was Brazil and Cuba. So it's pretty amazing, Portuguese and Spanish being spoken, watch them do their job. That's why we have to support our Border Patrol, CBP, ICE, make sure we help these individuals out. What they're doing out here is really heroes' work, but the way they treated them was incredible, with incredible respect.
Riggleman even broadcast some of his findings via Facebook Live.
This is New Mexico, that's Mexico, and if you pan a little bit, you can see this is actually the barrier that they have to jump over. You can even see me at 5'7". I could actually just leap this in one single bound. So you have the large fence that comes down and then the small fence.
Not long after, he posted another video on Twitter showing the transition between types of border fence and just how simple it is to cross into the USA.
This is actually the new barrier that I transitioned to. You can see you can just walk right through my leg is right between this. Right here is the fence. Right here is Mexico, so it's very simple for me to do this.
Riggleman has promised to continue updating throughout the duration of his visit.
The Federal Reserve cut interest rates today for the first time since 2008, with the hopes of maintaining the longest U.S. economic expansion ever.
The Fed cut its benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points, bringing the target range down to between 2% and 2.25%.
To sustain the expansion with a strong job market and inflation close to our objective for the benefit of the American people.
Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said the rate cut was a mid-cycle adjustment, which investors interpreted as further rate cuts this year being uncertain. Stocks on Wall Street dropped after Powell's statements, with the Dow falling almost 500 points before recovering some of those losses at the end of the day. The Fed's policymaking committee cited global developments and muted inflation as reasons for the cut. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
A senior State Department official is voicing concern over Beijing's use of Chinese international student organizations to suppress free speech on U.S. campuses.
In a speech made at the Education USA Forum, the Assistant Secretary told an audience of international education professionals that the U.S. welcomes Chinese students, but not the Chinese regime's efforts to take advantage of them.
Chinese officials are also known to pressure and pay Chinese students to participate in Communist Party-sponsored political protests and counter-protests. We can and we will push back hard against the Chinese government efforts to chill free speech on American campuses.
Many such protests Royce mentioned were organized by Beijing-linked Chinese Students and Scholar Associations, or CSSA. The student club has chapters on over 100 campuses across the globe. The club has organized protests against the Dalai Lama for his commencement speech at the University of California, San Diego, a Chinese student who criticized China's media censorship at University of Maryland, as well as a Uyghur Canadian activist speech on human rights abuses in Xinjiang, China. In 2007, when a Canadian human rights lawyer arrived at Columbia University to present a talk about China's persecution of adherents of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice banned in China, he was faced with protests from the CSSA, as well as an email stating anyone who offends China will be executed no matter how far away they are, sent to the student group's website. Royce encouraged the audience to double down on their efforts to welcome Chinese students and ensure they experience the academic and political freedom in America.
The United States will do everything in our power to protect all students. That's all students, especially Chinese students, from our authoritarian government control.
Chinese students make up 1/3 of all international students in the U.S. and contribute tens of billions of dollars to the U.S. economy each year.
5G promises a host of lightning-speed Internet of Things, but a leading physician says 5G technology must be used safely if it is to be used at all. One sensitive resident couldn't agree more.
When they were doing the 4G rollout, they were putting up a lot more cell towers back then, and they built a couple of them behind our apartment. And at that point, after the first tower went up, I started having a lot of symptoms, and I didn't relate it to the tower. After the second one went up, within a few weeks, I became very, very sick and became fully electrosensitive.
Cell phones, cell phone towers, wireless internet routers, cordless phones, and smart devices, as well as wireless wearables, give off invisible waves in the electromagnetic spectrum, or EMS. Symptoms can include poor sleep, fatigue, headaches, nausea, dizziness, heart palpitations, memory impairment, and skin rashes.
Certain type of people will react more intensely to the radiation. And if you've had a lot of exposure, then you're going to have eventually you're going to have a sensitization.
Dr. Rena Bray, a leading physician on EMS and its symptoms, says at least 3% of the population is sensitive to EMS, and the numbers are growing.
It's been increasing exponentially, I would say, in the last 15. I didn't see much of it 20 years ago, but in the last 15, it's just been inching, and then all of a sudden just taking off. So it's really quite alarming, actually.
5G networks carry a lot of information and use higher frequency and millimeter waves, meaning stronger and denser electromagnetic emission.
I think that the symptoms that I just mentioned will be more severe, to the point where more people will become disabled and not able to work or able to do their schooling properly or even live in their homes safely. It's going to be a huge burden on the healthcare system.
Chalmers has to move homes frequently to escape radiation.
I had to leave the country actually for a little while and go live in a radio-free zone down in Green Bank, West Virginia. It's the only legally protected area radio-free zone in the world.
Dr. Bray says the footprint is only going to get larger.
5G is a millimeter wave. It penetrates a little deeper. It has a lot of energy carrying through it, and it's pervasive. It's all over the place. It's like a blanket that just basically takes over every little space in a city or a town.
If 5G rolls out on a larger scale, tens of thousands of people like Chalmers will have nowhere left to go.
I think it's very unethical and unjust that this is just being rolled out without any thought, really, about the impact to health. And technology has to be pushed away, pushed back to a level where it's safely used.
Reporting by Eric Rusick, NTD News, Toronto.
In the historic town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, it is not uncommon to see a person or two walking down the street in period costume. NTD reporter Sherwin Rong has the story of what motivated some of them to live history.
Larry Clowers came to play Ulysses S. Grant practically by accident, or perhaps by fate. He was working as an extra in Southern California at the time, and the actor playing Ulysses Grant decided he didn't want to do it anymore.
So they looked at me and said, you're the right height, shape, and most importantly, the clothes fit you.
Just like that, he was playing the part of America's 18th president. Then he was asked to do it again, and he got into it.
I drafted her.
Referring to his wife Connie, who had been working in wardrobe and also happened to be the same height as Julia Grant.
In portraying Julia, I don't find much difference between myself and Julia, really. I pretty much have the same values that she had.
Larry and Connie have been portraying the Grants as living historians full-time since their retirement.
And between the two of us, we have over 200 books and publications about the Grants.
And though the couple has now performed 7,000 programs combined, it's anything but a job to them.
I know more about Ulysses' young life than I know about mine because it's written.
The couple eventually decided that this would be the only role they'd play for the rest of their lives.
What we want to do is make sure that we keep history alive. Yes. Remember where you came from. Remember your ancestors, what they went through.
The Clowers have a lot of love for the Grants and strive to represent them with integrity.
It's always surprising to me how forgiving he was. He could forgive you for anything.
What exactly is so inspiring about the program? He recalls when one student tapped on his shoulder while shopping.
He said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "I'm sorry, sir, I do not remember." He said, "You came to my 5th grade class years ago, and you made a difference in my life. And I just wanted to say thank you."
Just like him, the Grant story has inspired many.
I take them on this journey on how just because where you are, your circumstances, doesn't mean you're trapped there. You build your life yourself.
It's a compelling story, starting as no one, becoming someone.
Over the weekend in the rolling hills of Central Asia, the people of Kyrgyzstan continue the tradition of hunting with golden eagles during the Salburun festival.
At this year's Salburun event, around 15 golden eagle hunters brought their birds of prey. One of the golden eagle huntsmen says he spent time with the bird since infancy, as his ancestors had hunted with golden eagles as well.
Training them is not easy. We must understand, bond with the golden eagles. You can understand them by looking in their eyes.
He says it's important to bond with an eagle through eye contact and that the taming process is similar to training horses. The ancient tradition of hunting with golden eagles dates back to the 12th and 13th centuries, when a fine eagle and a good horse cost the same, and both lent prestige to their owner. The annual contest drew around 100 competitors from across the country, as well as international tourists.
I'm very impressed by these traditional games, and especially for me, I think the best, the most beautiful is when they hunt the eagles on their horses.
The festival also featured archery contests and competitions featuring the national breed of Kyrgyz hunting dogs, known for their ability to work in high altitudes.
That's all for today's NTD News. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.